once the product launched on Aldi shelves, which they believed that it was going to take about 10 days, which was the shelf life of a product to shift the product with probably a small percentage of wastage. We ended up selling all 25,000 units within 48 hours. And, all of a sudden we were doing all these different interviews that we'd never done any of this kind of stuff. But for the first time, it felt like in the UK, Jamaican patties were at the forefront of social consciousness because everybody was talking about Jamaican patties. And so because of that, Aldi said, actually, we're going to do another order with you and the manufacturers. And they ordered 100,000 units, and we sold 80,000 of that in a week. And that's when it really became something.
My name is Max from Black Income Creators Podcast, and I'm here today with Mike Williams. Mike, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Mike Williams, the co-founder of Flake Bake. We run a Jamaican patty manufacturing business established in 2012, and we are now the largest handmade Jamaican patty manufacturer in the UK. We supply about 20,000 handmade patties within the Caribbean food market. And in 2024, we won a TV show called Aldi's Next Big Thing, which allowed us to, for the first time, list our products with a major retailer. And since listing, we sold over 1.4 million patties into Aldi. And you can now, as of today, the 12th of March, get not just our chicken patty, but our beef patty in Aldi.
Wow, that is amazing. So I've got a bit of a bone to pick because I'm gluten-free. When is the gluten-free option coming out?
Well, it's available, just not for me. You have to check out my dear friend Natasha, who runs the Vegan Patty Lady, and she makes incredible gluten-free and vegan patties.
I know it's hard to do sort of specialist stuff, when you're manufacturing, because it's also like cross-contamination can be quite difficult to manage and stuff like that. So I know that it can be quite difficult to do. But it just means that, I'm looking at the pictures of the patties and online, and I'm like, guys, what happened? And I love patties as a child. I'm like, they just look amazing. So yeah, if you can sort that out, that'd be brilliant. That'd be happy days.
Which is why I'm shouting at Natasha, Vegan Patty Lady. She fills that gap. So I like to big her up because whenever people ask me, where's the gluten-free one? I'm like, it's so complicated to do you literally have to clear out the entire manufacturing space to do that because you can't have any element of cross-contamination.
It's the same. It's like nuts, isn't it? It's the two things that, you can't cross-contaminate and you can't control very easily. So you do need its own space. So I totally get that. So take me back a little bit because the story is interesting. It didn't start with you. It started with the generation before. So take me back a bit.
Yeah. So patties really started with my dad. So in 2008, we set up a Caribbean takeaway called Caribbean Spice in Peckham. So that was where it all started. It wasn't just a takeaway where you could get all your Caribbean meals. It was also a bakery. And we were doing a lot of hard dough bread back then. And then eventually we got someone to make patties because we were buying patties into this business initially, but predominantly being a takeaway. So we bought patties and then we made some bread. And then eventually we started to make other products, so like carrot cakes, etc. And then we got someone to make patties. And so that's where the patty business really started off with my dad, who's a baker, and he got this bakery business and takeaway. I think when I was at university, I wanted to do a little bit more, or coming to the end of my university years, I wanted to do a little bit more with my dad, having helped him over the years. And we'd seen that Levi Roots had won Dragon's Den back in 2007, and where he had brought the kind of demand for Caribbean food within the retail space with his Reggae sauce. And also there were other big names out there doing patty in retail. And because we thought we had a good patty, we could probably do something with that. So essentially after university, I took the patty out of that initial business my dad had, and me and him went 50-50 and set up that became known as Flake Bake. And we were going to become a specialized supplier of Jamaican patties into other Caribbean takeaways, because we had a few takeaways already buying from us. And it was a matter of just building that customer base by, using our driver to go out and drop flyers and give out samples. And that's how we started off gradually. And then we had National Carnival, which was the time of year where it was essentially our Christmas, because that's, when we have lots of vendors coming in search for patties. And the business just grew from there, really.
And tell me, so you're 50-50 with your dad. What's that like? Because family businesses, there's, pros and cons. So what would you say are the pros and cons of like working in a family business?
The pros is that often you've got people you can trust because you've grown up around them. Some of them have grown me, like my uncle and my dad, of course. And so, that element of trust, I haven't had to worry about much in terms of, say, my uncle, he's a senior delivery driver and he manages all the logistics for the products and stuff. I can trust him, hands on heart, to do the right thing at all times. More of the challenges would come in, so again, when you're working with older family members that you respect and you have to tell them that this is wrong or you want them to do things a certain way, and then that can be a little bit tricky, I have to say.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of that thing of like actually the hierarchy or like the relationship that you have as like, father and son can be a little bit complicated and also it's like when you guys meet up for non-work related things, do you find yourself talking about work outside of,
I guess with my dad and I, we've always been talking business, so it's a mixture at all times, whether it's at work. He's going to ask me about his grandchildren. Even when we're not at work, the patties might come up in some way, shape or form, because when you're an entrepreneur, it's almost never stop working. So even if I'm traveling, I'm doing some element of work or I'm touching base with the bakery and there's something always to do. So similarly with my dad and I being owners, we're always talking something to do with patty. And so that's just something that comes with the territory. But with all the family members who work with me, once we're at a family event, I try not to talk about work at all.
That's not easy, but I hear you. And tell me a little bit more about the Aldi Channel 4 opportunity. How did you hear about it?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So the backdrop to this is that we'd started in 2012. So after 10 years, getting through COVID, we'd really grown, but COVID really set the business back quite a bit, and we had to, take out as many loans to keep the business afloat, because we'd gone down, we closed for a period during the middle of COVID when COVID just landed, and then afterwards we went to like one day, and I really had to build myself back up to working 5 days a week. But even by then, the cost had risen so much and inflation is quite high, so didn't really want to carry on the business. So in 2022, so that's the 10-year mark, I'd said to my dad, I've had enough and I want to go do something else. But I knew he was happy with that decision because he'd already started spending more time in the Caribbean. So he said, I think you really put a lot into it. So whether we just sell it and move on, that will be down to you. So with the TV show, someone had sent me this opportunity. A dear friend of mine, Eugenia Pear, who we work together now, she sent me a link to firstly the winners of this TV show, saying these guys do pies. They won this TV show. It'd be really good for you to check it out. I think you'd be a good fit for the show and you could win. And I said to her, oh, yeah, thanks for sending this through. I'll have a look. And then I think a month later, she reminded me again about it. And I said, yeah, I'll definitely have a look. And time went on. And I remember I wanted to reach out to her. And I thought, oh, man, I promised I was going to look at this thing. And I thought, well, I best do it because I really want to So I wanted to reach out to her. So I thought, let me make sure I look at this thing. And I saw it. And when I went on it, I realized that I had just enough time to apply. And I thought, I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to rack up this business anyway. So let me go for it. And to my surprise, after I finished the application, a few days later, I got the phone call for a telephone interview. And the premise of the show was we would pitch your product. It doesn't matter what stage of production you are, even if you're making a product from home, you pitch to go on this TV show, and you would be competing with other food producers in your category. And our category is bakery, so we produce competing against other bakery owners with different products, and you pitch it to the managing director of buying for Aldi, which was Julie Ashfield at the time. And if you won, they would help you to manufacture a large scale to supply a retailer, and you'd see your product on shelf as a one-off listing, like a special buy listing for the first time. And if it went well, there was that opportunity for you to maybe spend some time and seek investment to scale, and then maybe in a few years you can come back to Aldi with it. So that was the premise of the show, and the long and short is they really loved the patties, and so we won the show when we pitched our product to them.
That's amazing. So then you kind of went through the process quite quickly then, from kind of winning to scaling.
So once we won, they connected us with a manufacturer, a large scale manufacturer. So the challenge was, how do we take this handmade product and scale it? Because normally we made 4,000 a day. So we were already big in our own respect on a local level, because we were doing 20,000 a week. But our first order, or the order we had with Aldi after winning the show, was 25,000 units. So we couldn't, in one go. We just needed to supply that in one go. And that's not something that we could do by hand. And also the level of compliance required was very different to supply major retailers. So we had to work with a large volume manufacturer and essentially get them to learn how to make our handmade process or apply our handmade techniques into large scale manufacturing. So that was quite challenging. And some of the ingredients like Scotch bonnet peppers and stuff like that, well, they didn't have, it's not the kind of chilies that they were using on a normal basis. So they needed to find the suppliers at volume to do that. And also suppliers that could meet a certain level of compliance, like BRC accredited suppliers. So that definitely took some time.
There's a lot to think about operationally. I think people look at it and they see the final product and it's like, yeah, it tastes nice and that's it, literally it. But what you're talking about is like the compliance journey to get something into somewhere like Aldi is quite a lot of loopholes that people, I think, just aren't aware of.
Yeah, it takes a very, very long time to even get set up on their system. So I'll tell you about the journey and then tell you how long it took to even get the second flavor in. So once the product launched on Aldi shelves, which they believed that it was going to take about 10 days, which was the shelf life of a product to shift the product with probably a small percentage of wastage, we ended up selling all 25,000 units within 48 hours, which really took them by surprise. We had so much publicity around it. We were on BBC News, Channel 4 News, ITV News, and a number of newspapers. And, all of a sudden we were doing all these different interviews that we'd never done any of this kind of stuff. But for the first time, it felt like in the UK, Jamaican patties were at the forefront of social consciousness because everybody was talking about Jamaican patties. And so because of that, Aldi said, actually, we're going to do another order with you and the manufacturers. And they ordered 100,000 units and we sold 80,000 of that in a week. And that's when it really became something. They realized this wasn't supposed to be a one-off product. It was something that they could work with long term. So they said, if you can find a long-term manufacturer to make the product, we will list the product in our stores come September. So this was April 2024, and I had until September to find a manufacturer that could make it. And that was a big challenge. If you one of the questions that I'm sure everybody asks me when I do an interview, what kind of challenges did I face as a business owner and entrepreneur? the biggest problem I had up until this point was probably staff members to make the product by hand. But now we sold out a major retailer, we couldn't get a large scale manufacturer to commit to making a product. And that took me a couple of months. And I did ask a number of the Jamaican patty manufacturers if they'd make the product for me under my brand. And they'd said no. One had said yes, but couldn't meet the criteria that we needed. But eventually I spoke to Aldi about it, who were quite surprised that no one was willing to make it. And I think we had about 30 no's from different manufacturers until, it was just very, very difficult because we knew we'd created this demand and we knew that we had a retailer interested, but then we couldn't get the commitment. And so when Aldi did pick up the phone and call a couple of the manufacturers, we started to get phone calls back.
So it was kind of nice. They had that kind of like big brother role in kind of like helping to push it along.
Yeah, there was that. They did help out. They really, really did. And I really didn't understand as well. So in the end, I realized a lot of the people that probably were saying they couldn't even meet the kind of volumes that we needed at that level, because we weren't just selling in a certain region. Aldi had 1,000 stores and we got listed in all 1,000. So it was a big kind of demand to fulfill.
And just in terms of something like a national supermarket chain like that, I mean, so basically you would have to make sure that it would sell all over the country, not just London, for example. Do you know what I mean? So they're saying actually everywhere is going to be able to order it and order a certain amount. So we need a certain amount, whatever. So have you seen a regional, like, sort of like difference, maybe like preferences regionally or anything like that?
Yeah, you will get that because say the 1,000 stores, they aren't split evenly across regions. So you'll have some regions that have more stores than others. And so you do see variations in sales. But say if you take when the product had initially launched, London, I think London was like the fourth busiest region in terms of the patty sales, because I guess if you think about it, in London, most people who want to buy a patty go to a Caribbean takeaway, and so you were getting all the regions where it was like Chester or I don't know, Cardiff, in places where people wouldn't normally have access to the product. These are the regions where people were really buying patties. After probably the first listing, when people saw this big demand, that's when I think London kind of picked up and started checking out the product. However, most of the big regions, whether it's Birmingham, London, Chelmsford, these kind of regions, they will pretty much, buy a similar amount of patties.
And I think it's interesting because your background is like economics, financial management, isn't it? So it's the sort of numbers bit. So is that what you tracked, or you kind of like, actually, I'm going to have to really get into sort of like the operations here?
In the handmade process, even though I wasn't making patties, so to speak, because we have an incredible team of men who know how to make patties and stuff, but I did a lot of the kind of packaging and dispatch delivery, and then I was running the company at the same time while doing that. But at this level, where you're using a contract manufacturer, when I'm not doing the kind of, I'm not involved in that part of it, but what I'm involved in is mostly the strategy and marketing side of things. So we never had social media before the show. We set up social media just before the show aired, and it's trying to understand how the dynamics of social media works and looking at the power of influencers. So my strategy, once I saw the importance of influencers, for example, was to try and work with key influencers within the food space to try and market and promote the product. And that's something I didn't see a lot of the competitors doing enough of, I believe. So when we posted our first Jamaican patty video of how we made them by hand in our bakery, we got 2 million views in 4 days, and it's one of the most watched Jamaican patty videos online. So that's the kind of thing I focus on a lot more than ever before. So marketing strategy, sales, connecting with buyers and people within the industry. That's what my job has become more of now compared to before, when I used to be sort of in the bakery on a daily basis in Peckham.
Yeah. And you said that it was like a team of men. Is that on purpose that they're all men?
No. So within the bakery space, specifically what I do, I often refer to it as old school Jamaican men who make Jamaican patties. And so these are the guys that are making patties that when I went into my dad's bakery, and a lot of these guys I took over into that business. But we do have women that work within the business, but mostly in different areas. It is a labor intensive job. I mean, we've had women work in that space before, but take for example our pots. So we are still filling in our Peckham bakery in really huge pots, and oftentimes it's a couple of guys in the production floor that would come in. Not to say that women can't manage it, but yeah, we've had cases before where some of these things are quite heavy, and so yeah, the guys do it. But I'm sure that you probably have women in this Jamaican patty space. I haven't come across a lot, but the ones that do, they work in other parts of our business. So whether it's in a couple of women work in packaging, like our office manager, she's female, and at the senior level, along with me, there's my wife and my friend that I mentioned, Eugenia Pear. We are the kind of management team within the business now. So they kind of oversee a lot of like social media stuff. Eugenia Pear manages a lot of, my wife actually manages the entire Aldi account. So with Aldi, that's pretty much myself and my wife that's managing that.
That's massive. And in terms of like, I'm just trying to think in terms of the art of, do you say rolling patties? What do you say? Like what do you call it in terms of what they do? Do you think that's an art that we might lose in the future?
It's a very good question, because one of my biggest challenges now is maintaining the existing handmade process while trying to scale into the larger scale kind of manufacturing, because the volumes that can be produced in a very limited time, it's surreal. So it takes us like a week on a normal basis without doing a double shift or anything. We're doing 20,000 patties, whereas for my manufacturers, they could do 28,000 in about an hour or two, for example. It's unbelievable what they could cover. They could do 100,000 in a day if needed, whereas for us, probably like 6,000-7,000 at best. And because it is time consuming, and they are usually, where we can cook in a day probably about 30 kg, 40 kg of mince. For the manufacturers, they could do 500 kg in just one hour. We're trying to keep the handmade one, because the level of authenticity and the craftsmanship that goes into that, if you don't protect it, it will die out. And we do have some youngsters coming through in the process that keeps it alive and keeps it going. And that's good to see, because I can tell you for a fact that nowadays you get a lot less people interested, male or female, in sort of these labor intensive manufacturing process. Even in large scale manufacturing, we do still need people. It's not the industry that people think of, because it's not glamorous, going into these kind of industry, and it's not customer facing or anything like that. So it really isn't a glamorous kind of industry, and sometimes it could be quite long hours as well.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of also the joy of it, is that it isn't customer facing. You don't have to be thinking about your job once you finish the job. So it's actually a really, in some ways, it's a nice job to have, because you don't have to do the whole
Yeah. I, I,
for 12 hours, It's kind
yeah.
of,
You know what? One of the things I'd say now, after running the handmade process for 12 years, it gives me great joy to see the rewards of what we've been doing for 12 years, because a lot of these TV interviews and stuff that's happened in the last year, they come down to a bakery in Peckham and they showcase the talent of the team. And these are people that have been making patties for 20, 30 years, and they're almost like unsung heroes. So to see them being spotlighted and showcased to the nation as to these are the people that are making these incredible patties that everyone's talking about, it is a real joy to witness. And they love an element of celebrity status. And I think to be able to, a lot of them, when someone, we do a news interview and then they get videos, I get the video sent to me and I send it to my team, and they'll be telling me, I sent it to my grandma in Jamaica, I sent it to my mom or whoever it is. That is quite special to see.
yeah, that was interesting. And so you've still got the bakery in Peckham.
Yep, good.
And then you've got the Aldi account, which is probably 80-90% of your business now, I guess. It's a big part of it.
Yeah, it's a massive part of it. So yeah, it's actually separated into two. So it's two different companies. So we keep it separate because I find it easier to manage. So it's one thing doing one thing and then the other one focusing. So again, with the Aldi account, it's been managed because it's managing relationship between myself and Aldi and manufacturer, whereas handmade process, you've got a team of 15, 20 people and they need to be managed. People need to do holidays and there's payroll and a lot of that stuff I'm still involved in. So, separating it makes it easier for me to manage and control. But yeah, the Aldi contract is the kind of thing that you say that's a life-changing contract, and it does change the business and the scale of the business as well, and the kind of people that you interact with and how we do business is very different. A lot of stuff is now done via email and things like that, whereas in the handmade process, it's a smaller business and you deal with a lot of independent customers. So it's a lot of phone calls that you're talking to people and you're building these relationships, where with the Aldi contract, a lot of the things are just automated and just happening, and you tend to get involved if something goes wrong.
Yeah. And then I see that you've also got the e-commerce side of things. So when did that start? Was that sort of as a result of the pandemic, or is that something that's come out later, since Aldi, or?
Correct. It's since Aldi, because our business, handmade process business, was largely B2B, so it's supplying into Caribbean takeaways. So unless you pretty much were a Caribbean business, you wouldn't know who we were, because we were on-branded, supplying directly into takeaway. And when people bought a patty, they wouldn't know it's our patty. So when we won the show and the TV show came out, we decided that we'd set up a online shop so we can ship our handmade patties around the country, because we had a strong feeling that the products would sell out and everyone who watched the TV show would still want to try and get their hands on the patty. So we set up the shop, and rightly so, even during the airing of the TV show, we could just see the online orders coming through, and we're thinking, wow, we're going to have to fill all of those in the next days or so. And but we put on a 2-week lead time to get these patties, and it was a really amazing experience, because with those 2-week lead time, it meant that we could call all the customers who were ordering, and there were a lot of people who would watch the show and stuff like that, and people were telling us about some experience they've had either when they went to Jamaica, or they had this one Jamaican friend at school when they went to school and they told them about Caribbean food. It was such a special moment. And lots of invite from people, whether they're based in Cornwall or Somerset. If you ever come down this side of the UK, please come and visit us because we saw you and your dad on TV and you were so lovely. We'd just love to have a meal with you. And yeah, it was a special time because it always felt like the nation was coming together to support us, and it was a really good feeling.
And it's interesting because obviously a few months before that, before the Aldi sort of opportunity came about, you were thinking about exiting the market. So
yeah, I mean, we it was a lot more that I put so much work in prior to that show to actually, come out of the business and go and set up shop essentially somewhere else. So my dad and I had seen some opportunities in like other development and real estate in Jamaica, and we were convinced that this was the next thing for us to do. And I'd been going to Jamaica back and forth throughout COVID, and looked at getting a home, and got my kids registered for school. So I was making those steps towards doing that. And I'd already spent in the year prior to that, my kids had gone for school for about 5.5 weeks there. So I knew, okay, this could work. So the next time I come back, okay, I will be going to this school. This is where we're going to be living. This is a project that I'm intending to work on. So yeah, I guess God decided otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, be honest, were the kids a little bit disappointed that they weren't going to be in like a sunny climate?
I think I was more disappointed than they were, but yeah, they were quite young.
Yeah,
they're still in nursery, so they probably don't even notice much of it. And this is why it's good not to promise children things, because if we had told them this is what you're going to do next, and then it didn't happen, then they would be asking us every day, when are we going? When are we going? So I did do that, but so many things happened as a result of the TV show. So many opportunities came where again, gone from no one really knowing who we were as a business, or even who I was on a kind of as an entrepreneur on a more public level, and all of a sudden I was doing speaking engagements, interviews and things like that, and getting a lot of opportunities to bring Jamaican patties in spaces that they probably wouldn't have normally been. So I remember when we got the phone call about an event at the Labour Party conference and bringing patties there, and I thought, oh wow, that would be amazing. And then it went from just ordering the patties for the event to, why don't you come and set up a stand at the conference and kind of talk to people about your business. And I realized the power of that. So every time I went somewhere and introduced the patties to a new audience, one, they loved it and the patties would sell out in no time. But two, we would get more online orders from our shop. So there was always a benefit in going places to talk about the patties and our journey or TV show and being available in Aldi always proved to add that bit of credibility. So if someone never heard of the product, but you say you also supply to Aldi, then that probably got more conversations going.
And you mentioned a bit about sort of like, obviously having to become like the front man of the business, a business which was very much B2B, like you say. So you didn't have to do the whole social media and sort of like becoming a sort of a personality around it. How easy or difficult has that journey been in terms of having to transition your role again? One thing, working for Aldi, you'd have to transition out of being like very hands-on. I get that. But this is also like transitioning out again into sort of becoming a bit more visible.
Yeah, I that was definitely new because I always liked a quiet life, so always remained quite private. And so even though I was running this patty business, very much focused on my personal life and doing things that I enjoy, especially traveling. I was traveling as much as I can, even with my children. We traveled a lot. We just spent, for example, 2 months in Asia. So to do this now, where when you're at the face of something, you have to be present. So for the first part, I had to say to my wife, actually, we can't travel at all because I needed to promote the business, to network and things like that. So it was a new stage, but I felt like I was ready. I definitely felt like I was ready for it because as I was going along. So even throughout the TV show, throughout the process, I would think about what would it mean if we won. So if the nation sees your brand and product, it could mean that you're getting potential interest for investment, or you might get other people interested in the product. So what things do I need to do to be ready for this? And I started networking with people on LinkedIn as well, and just searching or researching what other entrepreneurs were doing. So, I found out about awards, for example. So I started looking at the different awards, saying, you know what, if our business gets to a certain stage, or we get enough interest, or the story grows from what it was initially, I might be eligible for some of these awards. So I'll start applying and things like that. And some we start to get nominated for. And we found, before we knew it, we won 2 Best Patties in the UK award. I won 2 Entrepreneur of the Year awards. We also just won this massive kind of prize, which is the Channel 4 Black in Business initiative, which gives us 150k advertising spend on Channel 4, as well as mentorship and a bespoke advert to go on Channel 4. So I think I was ready for a lot of this stuff. And it's also very important for me to be a positive role model in the community. So whenever, I got given opportunities to do anything, I'd always want to represent my community to the best of my ability. So not just for my family, or not just for myself, but, Peckham itself, or the Black community, or even Jamaica, where I was born and raised. So it was very important for me to represent and also excel, because there was that element of people didn't even expect the product to do as well as it did, because it was still quite new to a lot of people in a lot of spaces. And I just wanted to prove to people that, you know what, our product is as good as any other product on the shelf, and it's worth its space on the shelf. And that's what led to us getting a contract, because I feel like we were ready, or I was preparing for this kind of opportunity.
And what I'm hearing as well, I mean, I don't know if you notice it, but it's also about bringing people with you. So like you said about the friend who gave you, who told you about the opportunity, she now works within the business. You mentioned the sort of like the vegan patty make. Do you know what I mean? And some entrepreneurs don't do that because they see everybody as competition. So that's kind of nice to see you bringing people with you on the journey, rather than it being a solo journey.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. My friend doesn't only just work with me as a colleague. I also gave her shares in the business as well, because I didn't think, I would have gone a complete different path if I didn't really pursue the opportunity she told me about. Also, my wife, just perfect timing. She'd worked in banking for some years, and it just felt like the right time. Things were moving so fast that I really needed some support. And like I said, she just came on board at the right time. And now she taken over or manages this entire account for me. And it's not an easy thing to manage such a huge account and lots of invoices coming in. And it's, it's a big task. And then I guess where other entrepreneurs are concerned, for me, it's about sharing knowledge, whenever I've learned something. So, Vegan Patty, she's in the same industry. She started a lot later than I did. So it's trying to make sure that she doesn't make the same kind of mistakes that I made, as someone that's from the local community as well. And then as far as other entrepreneurs go, who are not necessarily in the food industry, it's offering mentorship, because I have been in this space for 12, 13 years. So there's a lot of things that I might know that they could benefit from, whether it's negotiating contracts or managing cash flow and all that kind of stuff. Those kind of things go across industry. So we're always trying to be a role model, like I mentioned, and to support others around me.
Yeah, and you touched on mistakes, and I think that's something that everybody asks. Like, what mistakes do you think you made? I mean, something like a pandemic you can't predict, so that's that's outside of what I would consider to be a mistake in terms of a business model. I mean, you can make it sort of like pandemic proof afterwards, but none of us knew beforehand, and a lot of businesses suffered from that. But anything that you think in the early days, or even like when your dad was doing it, because that's a different model, isn't it? It's like a purely different kind of like a bakery model. What mistakes do you think potentially were made?
When you're business or entrepreneur, you always make mistakes, and it doesn't matter what stage of business you are in. Um, and I started straight out of university, so yeah, there was a lot of mistakes that were going to be made, but probably the biggest one that I did make was probably offering too much credit to a number of customers, uh, because ultimately you don't know what's going to happen. So you give too much credit, and tomorrow you find out that this person had a really big financial problem somewhere else, and they can't afford to pay you, or their business closed down. But there was one particular customer that I'd been servicing for about, well, even before me and my dad was supplying this customer, and then I supplied him for 12 years, and he built up a huge debt. But because he was our biggest customer, I almost felt like I couldn't afford to lose him, because when you lose your biggest customer, that's taking 30 to 40% of your supply. Then you're like, well, I'm gonna have to lay off people, and you never really want to be in that position. So when he did decide he didn't want to pay me anymore, it was a big blow. But luckily, it came around the time of the Aldi opportunity, so that kind of helped. But if the Aldi opportunity wasn't there when that happened, we would have suffered a lot more. But luckily, again, I was able to, through all the new contacts I'd gained, all of a sudden, almost overnight, I was able to get a very good lawyer to help me to recoup all of that money that he owed. It took some months, but I did win in the end. But that was one of the mistakes I realized: never give out credit that you can't afford to give away as a business owner, especially when you're doing it with lots of independent business. But that was one of my biggest mistakes.
Yeah. And in terms of managing staff, because you've got quite a unique staff team, so it's family, it's people that worked, with your dad back in the day, so it's quite unique. How do you sort of I don't know, change your management style, I suppose, to suit that?
I guess at the start it may have been challenging, because I was seen maybe as a bookworm coming into a space that you really had to have the skills to do it. And so someone, you're just like, oh, what do you know about patties type thing, that kind of notion going on around in the business. But I definitely gained the respect of people quite quickly after they saw how rapidly I was even changing the handmade process, because we set it up. But bear in mind, they were already working with my dad. But so it's almost like I've come and they have a way of working, and I'm here, and here I come saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. And they were like, well, but this isn't how we operate, and this is how we do things. But then after a while, when they saw that I was getting the results that we needed, there's, you start to gain respect. Or take my dad, for example. I came in and I quickly changed a lot of the suppliers, because I could get better rates from other suppliers. So I said to that one, well, I don't want to buy your flour anymore. I'm going to buy it from this person. And some of them was quite surprised. How can you not buy from us? Your dad's been buying for years. So, well, no, I'm not going to, because I can get it at a better rate. And straight away, I the first few years I was actually making money off the suppliers rather than from the customers, because I was just getting better prices from people. And my dad really respected that, because these are just things that he hadn't thought about before. But I had a lot of time in my hands to try and make things better.
Mm. And I suppose he didn't have the capacity. If you're working in the business, it's difficult to work on it.
I mean, I was a victim of that. So even myself, so it took me 12 years to get to a stage where we could supply a major retailer. Not that I was trying to do that, but you can see now that this scale of speed at which I'm scaling the business and even promoting it, it's because I'm not there in the bakery every day anymore. So I also became a victim of that. But my dad and I have two different skill sets, and that's what makes it probably work so well. He was very much a product person, so he focused on the quality, and naturally he's a baker, so he focuses on that. Whereas I was the person that came and created an operation or system that I felt could work best, but also managing business. My dad, before, when he had the takeaway/bakery, he always had people managing, whereas I was kind of come in and I was going to manage this new business that we're setting up. So it's two different skill sets who complement each other well. And so that's why I think it works.
I noticed on your site you said that you're going to come out with some new products. Talk to me about that.
I can't give it too much away on that, but we
But I think give me like sort of when can we expect these products to drop if you can't tell me the products, you know what I mean?
I think people might see them at the end of summer. So we're working on some new product range. So of course with patties, with Aldi. So I said I was going to mention this. So we listed in September 2024, and then by end of October, they said, okay, you can bring another flavor in, but to get that product ready to launch and stuff, it took months, and you have to pass all these checks and compliance, and your product has to go to a lab, and then Aldi's legal team has to approve the product name and the specification of the product, the ingredients. There's so much that goes into that. It takes months to get that approved. So that's why, even though the sales will go well, we didn't launch chicken until 6 months from the beef. It does take time. Whereas in my handmade process, if you want to try a different flavor patty, I buy some ingredients for the chef, and I'll say, try this out, and let's see what we can come up with. So it's a lot easier when we have our own operation and smaller scale. But with the retailers, it can take long to bring a new product to market. So you probably will see some more patties, just like how we brought chicken. So some of the other traditional flavors, if we get range extension, because that's also dependent on the retailer, they have to say, actually, we're happy to give you a bit more shelf space and you can bring another flavor. But in order for them to bring another flavor, they have to remove another product. And that's why it's also so difficult to get your product in. Each time a product goes in, you have a listing agreement or contract to list that product. So it might be 6 months, it might be a one-off listing, it could be a year, it could be 2 years. So if they've got an agreement with a different brand, they have to wait till that contract ends before they can bring another product in. But we're staying in the kind of bakery space, so we want to bring out some different products within that space, and hopefully the market likes it.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. And in terms of, so you're working with Aldi, obviously, really closely. If you were to say, I want to move into Sainsbury's and Waitrose, what does that look like? Is that something where it's an exclusive Aldi deal and you can't work with others, or how does it work?
No, we don't have an exclusivity clause. Good question. But the reality is that you do have other patty brands in other retailers, and they still see Jamaican patty as a niche. So yes, we've done very well in Aldi, but we also don't have any competition in terms of another Jamaican patty brand within Aldi. And that probably accounts for why we've sold so many and at such a fast rate. But relative to other products, so, like a normal beef slice or something, you'll get a bigger demand for them, mostly because they're a more traditional product. People know them. So that's probably why you haven't seen us in other retailers. We did have interest initially when the product launched, but like I mentioned, we didn't have manufacturing sorted out. And by the time we sorted them out, I guess some of the opportunities I haven't even had time to follow up on. There's a lot of opportunities that we had when the product had come out, and I said essentially we're searching for manufacturer to support our supply chain, but haven't followed up on it. And then for some of them, they've sort of said, like, this isn't retail. They don't think we have enough budget to manage marketing and things like that. But I'm sure over time, especially now we have the sales to back up our story and our kind of business argument, that could change in the near future.
And help me understand a little bit more around cash flow, because I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs struggle, especially at the beginning of their journey. Like, how do you manage that? And I mean, something like manufacturing, yes, there's things like credit, like you say, but manufacturing, retail, that's quite a lot of time when you're not getting paid yet.
Yeah, this is very interesting. So I was talking about this yesterday at UK Export Finance at breakfast, where we're looking at challenges that people face, or small minority business face, in terms of exporting. And even outside of exporting, this is just one of the common things, the cash flow. A lot of people, when you go to a manufacturer to pay the manufacturer, as I understand, because I'm not in this position, but as I understand, it's very common that you have to pay the manufacturers up front for making that product. Or you might, the retailer or whoever you're supplying, your customer might raise a purchase order to deliver a certain amount of goods. You send that to your manufacturer, and that order might take a week to fulfill, maybe 2 weeks or a month. But once that order is fulfilled, you need to pay the manufacturer. Now, you've supplied the goods to that particular retailer or whoever that customer may be. The payment terms may be 60 days. So you've had to pay, I don't know, for £100,000 worth of goods, and you took, say, 2 weeks to deliver it. You're not going to get paid for that for 60 days. So that's 2 months. And then 2 weeks later, you need to do that again, where you get another 100,000 and you still haven't taken in any money. That could be very, very difficult. And so there are products that banks and other lenders could help you with to do this. And one in particular known as invoice financing, where as long as you've got proof that this money is going to come in, you can get 80% of
So factoring. So the factoring.
Factoring that the actual order that you've got. But again, people need to know this, and you need to be prepared to lose that percentage, because there's a small percentage fee that you will need to pay to borrow or that money to fill that gap. In our case, again, we've been very privileged in terms of the agreements that we have with Aldi and our manufacturer. We've got credit going into the manufacturer, and it could be because, well, Aldi helped us to negotiate this deal. So that was very helpful. So we tend to get paid first, and then we pay our manufacturer, but that is not normal. So I'm grateful for the position that we are in, because we've been able to build our cash flow quite comfortably off the back of this Aldi deal, which would allow us to further kind of expand and scale and go into other markets.
Would you expand the bakery side of it, or do you think that's kind of like, actually that works really well, and I like the fact that it's niche and it's in Peckham? Do you know what I mean? Or would you think about, actually, why don't we do bakeries in other places? It doesn't always have to be London.
Yeah, there is an argument to expand, but as you can imagine, this handmade process is very difficult to scale, and that's why it's taken 12 years to get to where we are. But there is an argument for it if we put the right sort of training systems in place, where we're training more and more people, if you can find them, to stay in the industry long enough, then we could get a bigger site, because we've already outgrown our existing site anyway. So there is a need for a bigger site. But we want to make sure that we have the people and the upcoming skills to maintain it, because if you start to lose the workers after a while, then you face this challenge of you can't find people to work, and also location. So we're in essentially central London. We're off the Old Kent Road. We're about a 12-minute drive from London Bridge, 10 minutes from Tower Bridge, so pretty central. For us to get a location, we probably have to go further out, but a lot of our team live within Southeast London, so can they get to work if you go too far out? And that in itself poses a challenge for us. So yes, it's a nice thing to want to scale, but at the same time, it's so important to maintain what we've got because it works well for everybody involved. The people know the system, they know the process, and it's sort of self-sufficient, and it's allowing me to sort of step away and scale comfortably to some degree with this large volume manufacturing. And so trying to scale both at the same time, it definitely poses some kind of challenge for us. So maybe not right now.
Do you see a point at which you would exit? Is there a point where you're like, you know what, enough, let me just go live in Jamaica and enjoy my life? Not this piece.
That's a good question. I didn't know this term about like a market disruptor. I didn't know the term before, but now I've seen the term, and people saying disrupt a brand, etc. There is an appetite to disrupt the market enough for the big names who were turning me down in terms of manufacturing to accept that we're a worthy brand, to say, actually, do you know what, how did we let this one slip? And then they approach me to buy it, and then I charge a ton load of money compared to what they could have paid at the start to acquire me. There is an appetite for that. However, in saying that, my main focus is to keep raising the aspirations for young entrepreneurs to think big, dream big. So I am trying to take the brand and the business as far as I can, with an element of support, and then maybe if I get a good enough offer, but I have no intentions of kind of stopping work, anything like that. I just want to do the best I can to fulfill my own potential, and in turn, I'm sure it will make my family proud, my community proud, and if I can bring a few more entrepreneurs on along the way, then that's also something that's very important. And with two young children, give them something to look forward to as well. So if my daughter on the first day of school in reception, we did a video of what do you want to be when you're older? When you're older, what do you want to be? And she said, I want to work in Flake Bake. So you never know, I could be raising young entrepreneurs to come and take over.
I just want to ask about, when you were going into Aldi and you had to do like the quality compliance, part of it, did you have to tone down the Scotch bonnet?
I remember, I've never said this in an interview, but I remember when we were sending samples in to the actual buyer. So first you have the TV show and you win, and great. Now you have to deal with the person who will buy your product. And, if they say no, they're not, you don't have a contract or a deal. And I remember once he got the product in and he called me and he said, were you happy with that sample? And I said, well, I'm asking them to make some adjustment because it was probably a little bit too spicy. And he said, oh, good, because I had one and it almost blew my head off. So I've definitely toned it down for the mass market. You have to, because you think about the palettes you're trying to reach. If in Southeast London, our handmade patties, we're buying Scotch bonnets directly and we're putting them in to the patties, and people traditionally have these patties spicy, and these are people that are used to spicy food, and they know what they're going to get. On a mass market, you're going to introduce the patty to even children. Think about it, even children are having these patties and they don't have a palate for spicy food. So if you're trying to serve them, it's either two things. You can say, you force it down their throat saying you have to have this spicy thing, and they'll probably just think, oh, it's too spicy for me. Or you can balance that a little bit and try to say, do you know what? Yeah, our products, we do have spicy products, but also we can tone it down so everyone can enjoy. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because if you're trying to reach all the markets, then you try and do things to suit their needs. And that's normal within business. That's very, very normal.
I think it's about that. And I think that's the beauty of, being so close to the whole business is that you can make those kind of decisions and be flexible and think about actually the market needs a little bit of a tweak. I can't keep doing what we've always done, which is what I think the mistake a lot of business owners make. It's like, this is how my product is and I'm not changing it. Do you know what I mean? It loses its authenticity. It doesn't lose its authenticity. It has to be, accommodating to a mass market.
Yeah, but in saying that, so you look at the ingredients that we're using in the patty with the large volume supply, it is still a recipe taking the same product. So we're not changing the Scotch bonnet, spring onion, thyme, garlic, onions. We're not changing those. No, we kept those. So there was that. When they had to search for the Scotch bonnet supply and they couldn't really find one that was, met the level of compliance. It was more like, oh, we already have chilies. Can we use chilies? And then I'd say, well, then it won't be a Jamaican patty because it loses the flavor profile. And they were kind of asking the manufacturer, but isn't it just chili or spice? And I was like, well, no, because the Scotch bonnet has a particular flavor profile that even so much so that you can cook with a Scotch bonnet. And if you don't cut it open and you just have it in the pot, you can get the taste without the like that burning sensation or the spiciness, because it and I don't know how many chilies can really do that, where you can have them in a pot, you get the flavor of the chili, but not the burning sensation. Most chilies don't do that, but Scotch bonnet, it's got this kind of fruity taste to it that you can almost draw out from a certain type of cooking technique if you don't like spicy food. So once I kind of explained that to them, that it's not just the spice, it's the flavor profile, they understood it a little bit more. And so we don't compromise on that kind of stuff. We keep the core ingredients that make up, say, Jamaican cooking within the product.
And is there, I suppose when you're dealing with manufacturers at the moment, there's the one, but if you were dealing with like multiple ones, is there some sort of like protection, IP, something that people would need to think about in terms of something like a recipe?
Another good question. So we do sign NDAs. So on your side, to make sure if you're an entrepreneur and you're working with manufacturer, it doesn't matter what industry, you need to have NDAs in place, because they will have manufacturing techniques that they don't want you to go off and tell anybody, and you have your ingredients and how you make a product, and we don't want them to share that information with anybody. So you have a clear agreement, because you both have things to lose here. So you have NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, that we put together to make sure you're both protected, and you have to be clear on who owns what. So if they make the product, or they came up with certain elements of the ingredients because what you gave them didn't work, you have to agree who owns the rights to these IP. And so in my case, I own all IP around the ingredients, around the recipes and stuff like that. But you can't really protect it, and you can't protect your Scotch bonnet and spring onions. You can't protect that either. No, so you just have to have NDAs between you and just be clear on who owns the rights to the stuff, and you can sign agreements to that. So say if I left that particular manufacturer, if you have that agreement that you own the right to this particular recipe, they can't start making your product because you have an agreement. And so you could sue them with these kind of agreements, even though you don't have actual, you can't patent the recipe, for example.
Yeah. And you said that your dad is now spending most of his time in Jamaica. Is that still true, or is he very much here?
Yeah, he has been for a while. He has been for a while. So I've been, so like I mentioned, my half, because I didn't have any money coming out of university, was I was going to come in and I was going to make this business a success. So I've always been running it, so to speak. And my dad's, there was a point in time, especially when we were trying to get the processes right. So whereas what temperature do we bake and how many products are we baking at a time, that kind of stuff, when we're setting all of that up, he was very involved in that. What ultimate pastry recipe are we going to use? What thickness of pastry are we going to use? He was very involved in that. I was more involved in the actual cooking side, in terms of how long are we cooking our fill for? what's the spice blend mix that we're going to create and stuff. And we did get some help with that from a friend. And then over time, we just changed the spice blend to what we wanted it to be. So there were times when he was more involved and less so. And when he's around, he does help. Anything that I want help with within the business when he's around, that's how he supports, whether it's getting certain stock into the business and things like that. Any kind of maintenance. If I needed someone, like tonight, I think he's at the factory. We're getting some electrical works done, and he's the one that's there in person because I don't really go as much, but also I have 2 young children, so he understands. So when he's around, he really does support as much as he can with the Aldi business. Not much involvement at all, but whenever I want him to show up for everything, any particular thing, my dad's there to support that.
That's great to hear. And how can people find you, apart from Aldi?
Apart from Aldi, so you can follow us on Instagram at Flake Bake Patties, or you can go on our website, www.flakebake.co.uk, and you can order patties from our online shop. Or you can come down and find us at the Pen Art Centre, Unit 12, SE15 1TR, and you can come and buy freshly made hot patties from the bakery.
And what's the nearest station to the Peckham bakery?
South Bermondsey Station. It is a Peckham postcode, but South Bermondsey Station.
Yeah, I was thinking, okay.
Such a strange setup that we're on the border of Peckham and South Bermondsey. So once you...
Lambeth? Is it all Lambeth, or is it Southwark
and Lambeth? Southwark. So Southwark and
Lewisham?
Southwark and Lewisham. Is Bermondsey Lewisham? I don't know.
Bermondsey's those weird places. Like there's certain places. Stretham's another one where it kind of like 2 or 3. Finsbury Park, there's 2 or 3 councils.
Yeah.
So difficult.
Yeah, so weird. But yeah, South Bermondsey Station is the closest to the bakery. But yeah, we have a lot of people that come in who wants that handmade patties. Now we do sell to a lot of Caribbean takeaways, but I'm not even sure I'm allowed to mention them because they like to make people think they make the patties. So I can't say, but chances are if you're in Southeast London and you're in a Caribbean takeaway, it's probably our patties because we supply 20,000 of them, 20,000 patties into Caribbean takeaways every week in Southeast London. So you're probably eating our patties and you don't even know.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. I'm going to stop the video.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.